This is Create the Next from ProCFO Partners, where every week we explore strategies and ideas for financial management and growth to help today's businesses put their financial picture in context.
Welcome back to Create the Next. I'm Chris Bentliff, and I'm joined by managing partner and co-founder of ProCFO Partners, my good friend Nelson Tepfer. And Nelson, when you told me what we were going to talk about today, I immediately was excited, and I just want to share this anecdote to kind of kick us off. I had a conversation just 2 or 3 days ago with a professional services company, and part of their, they signed up with some outfit, and part of what they got with that was a website, a free website. Great. And all they've had is problems since the minute that they got going with that. And so they called me and they said, can you help me with this? And I said, okay, give me a little bit of understanding. And then they said, they gave us this free website. I said, oh, so you've been paying them for this website? And they said, well, no, it's built in free. I said, no. How much time have you already wasted having to worry about this, having to figure this out on phone calls, in emails? That has a cost to it. Congratulations, your free website has been costing you much more than the free dollars and cents that you thought it would get. And I think that that's a great way for us to sort of dive into some of this together when we talk about you get what you pay for. And I can't wait to know more about your experience on what do you mean by that when we talk about you get what you pay for.
So, Chris, always great talking to you. Thank you for having me back on. I always enjoy our conversations. So you get what you pay for is obviously a very, very wide-ranging topic to dive into, but we can start with some of the basic ones, from our perspectives as CFOs and financial executives. Very often within organizations, there's always that, and we can start with simply the employee side of things, just the compensation that you pay for your team and having that conversation around you get what you pay for. Forget titles for whatever reason, because very often we see that mismatch of title and experience and compensation level. So assuming all of that is correct for the moment, the companies that choose to pay or negotiate harder for what the comp level should be, and the result is either a poorly performing, underperforming, and not qualified employee, or just one who's 6 months later already looking for the next dollar or the next different company for them to move over to for a little bit higher compensation. So, as most of us know, the cost of replacing an employee obviously is ridiculously high. I think I've seen numbers up to between 2 and 3 times what that salary is. So a lot of it comes down to you get what you pay for when it comes to your employees. As you obviously want to pay as much as you can, or should want to pay realistically as much as you can to make sure you have the right people on board. Because the not doing that, unfortunately, costs a lot more than just the actual dollar amount difference in salary negotiation that you went through with that employee.
Why is it that as leaders, at least in my perspective, we are chronically inadequate in this area? We either don't look for talent in the right way. We think that we're better equipped than somebody who, a recruiter, for instance, who really does this and sharpens their knives on this all day long. But we're constantly in this, the tension between, incentives or compensation and talent and performance is always there, and it can be a healthy one. But I think business leaders are constantly thinking they can coach from within, or they can develop this person, or they can hire the young buck out of college and turn them into something. And as you're describing, even if I get to performance with them, the parabola on that is so much steeper than finding the right talent in the right time. Well, what's my problem?
We can back that up a little bit for a second to an even bigger topic. And it's a topic we've already discussed when it comes to the skill wall and various conversations that we've already had. But some of it is recognizing that that employee, having the right person in the right seat kind of conversation very often is certainly more than just strictly the dollar or the compensation or just that salary that you're paying that person. For most people, yes, that's what they look at as a measure of what they're doing or how they're doing it. But very often what's going to truly engage that employee, which is where companies truly get the productivity and get the team that they're looking for, is very often beyond just strictly that base compensation dollar that you're negotiating when the person's walking in the door. So it's how do you build that engagement and build that culture around that person, so you're not strictly just paying it for the dollar amount that we've already negotiated, or both of you walk away upset with because you settled on a number neither of you are happy with and bringing this person on board for.
And we do have some great episodes on that, on engagement and how employees need to feel valued and that their values align with a company's values. So is it a cultural issue, do you think, or where are some other places where, I'm thinking about everything from facilities to vendor relationships to, the other partners that I have around me that can help me out, such as my CFO. Where else am I getting what I pay for? And how should I be thinking about this? It's obvious. It's intellectually we know, but we always emotionally make some other decision. At least many of us do.
We absolutely do. So obviously, you have to recognize that yes, you can't just get pay for whatever it is that the number is. If you can't afford it, you can't afford it. Whether it's an employee or an advisor or an expert or a vendor in any way, shape, or form. There's obviously beyond a certain point where you simply cannot afford it, which makes the entire conversation moot. But very often it's important to recognize what is the value either for this role or this expert or this vendor or this whatever expense you're thinking about. What is the true value to you in having this done correctly or done right or done so you don't need to think about it anymore? So take an employee, for instance, and we can pick any employee at any level. What is the value in having this employee be somebody you don't need to micromanage, or you don't need to stay constantly on top of, you don't need to fix errors, you don't need to have 3 other managers overlooking this person's role? What is the value in that? And what is that compensation difference in making sure you're getting that right value? So for instance, you can have one employee like that at one level of compensation, whereas if you pay to get the next level, you can get an entirely different level of talent. What is the value of that spread for you? What is the value in not having to, again, spend all of your time managing, fixing, creating the tension that may come from having that underqualified, or, again, there's a base level of qualification, which, obviously below that, the conversation is entirely moot. But even assuming you're looking at these 2 types of things, what is that value? And then truly understanding that when it comes to when you're creating, again, whether it's the compensation for that, the salary range for what these roles look like, it's truly understanding the value for what this will provide for you moving forward.
Give me some parameters around that idea of value. Should I be literally figuring out a hourly rate or a dollar rate? I think you mean.
So we can get into some specifics. Tell some fun stories here. Take a company that decides they need a controller. For instance, we can use that title obviously because that's something we come across quite often in the type of work that we do with our clients. They need a controller. Now, a good, experienced controller, obviously demands a certain level of compensation. Can you find one for $20,000 or $30,000? Yes, absolutely. What does that cost you when you choose to hire somebody $20,000 to $30,000 less, who is not as qualified, not as experienced, not as relevant, doesn't have the right, having done this before? Now, if you truly cannot afford that $20,000 to $30,000, then you might want to look at what the role you're looking for. And that's not perhaps a controller. That may be an accounting manager. That may be a senior or some other type of managerial role. But that's truly understanding what you're paying for and what the value is and what you're getting from that. Because a truly experienced and really good controller obviously takes so much more off of your plate as a business leader, can handle so much more within the organization, so you don't have to deal with this. You might need 1 or 2 less staff people. So they might save you an extra $50,000, for instance, because they know enough to understand the right processes and procedures to actually implement around some of the things that they deal with. They might know better vendor negotiation and save you more money that way. So when you just look at it as just strictly that dollar amount of, this person is $20,000 more than this, well, you get what you pay for many of these instances.
It's a great perspective. And I love this idea of kind of the cost of not, because part of what you're describing is not just their capabilities and their skill sets and what they will do, but all of the opportunity that open up to you as a leader. When you are not having to deal with this, you can do more visioning, you can do more goal setting, you can do more strategic thinking, you can do more of X, Y, and Z.
Absolutely.
Exponentially.
And around business, this comes up so often. Forget about just your employees. Which accountant are you working with? Mm-hmm. Which lawyer are you working with? Yeah, there are different, obviously lawyers cost varying amounts per hour and varying structures around the way they work. But very often you should have an expert, which is going to cost you more for some of the issues you may be dealing with, because not having that expert can cost you a whole lot more farther down the road if you don't have the right lawyer in your corner. Similarly with an accountant, it's not strictly about, well, how much is he saving me on taxes? There's a perspective and an expertise that comes with having the right advisors in your corner that really allow you to continue to grow and scale your company.
That is a great point. Do you have some advice on, I don't know. Are there some places where I can realistically and sort of reasonably look to create a savings of time or of money or of convenience or whatever? These are places. I loved what you shared a second ago where you said, look, maybe if you can't afford an X controller, maybe you can afford some variant of that is less responsibilities. How can I think of this beyond just look, you got to be ready to dish out more for higher performance? What if I can't do that? How do I break it down a little bit?
So in talking about the finance and accounting function, which is obviously where our expertise lies, where we can start there. There are varying layers or levels of outsourcing you can look to employ, whether it's at the bookkeeper or controller level, where you may be able to pay for a higher level of expertise because you don't need it as much. So it's understanding the value of having a fully built function that's going to support what you're doing. Obviously, from our perspective, we look at the CFO level. Most companies don't need a full-time CFO. So you shouldn't be paying that full-time real CFO salary. You should be looking to bring in somebody like us because we can take on that role just on a part-time basis. But even, again, we were talking about the controller kind of roles where we've seen this happen, for instance, is, an example where they thought they needed a full-time CFO. And then after our conversation, they said, okay, maybe a controller. And after we figured out what they needed, it was actually an accounting manager and us overseeing that accounting manager. And that ended up being much cheaper than what they initially were planning on spending as a CFO.
Do you feel like, what if I flip this on its head? What if what I'm paying for, what if I'm not getting what I should be getting when I pay for it? So I'm thinking about, there's companies that are pulling a lot of dead weight. And if I've got a high level CFO or other finance function, other executive, 6-figure person, and they've been with me for a long time, but they're not helping me modernize. They're not keeping up. How do I start to recalibrate my expectations of what I am paying for?
So that's actually a little bit of a trap that many fall into the way you phrased it. It's not recalibrating your expectations. It's recognizing that that you did not get what you were looking for in this hire. And again, we see this very often as companies grow. We were talking to one company recently where they said they brought on, again, their top finance person. They were calling it a VP of finance. So again, a very significant salary, compared to the company size. And 2 years later, they still don't have the insight they needed to make the decisions that they were looking for from that role. And they were asking me, well, we tried giving more support. And I just asked them point blank, is like, I understand you're trying to build around this person, but is this the right person for you? And you see both of the people I'm speaking to kind of pause and said, well, probably not. Just having that recognition over there. So it's not about recalibrating their expectations. It's recognizing that their expectations were realistic. They had the wrong person over there to try and meet them.
That is a great point, and I feel like we should reiterate it. There are a lot of leaders who lower their expectations or minimize their hopes of something because as soon as somebody gets into a role, they realize, oh, okay. And then they get it back into what you shared before. Well, if we try to let go of this person, it's going to be another umpteen weeks before we can train. So we got to go back into recruitment mode. Let's just settle. Do you feel like that's something that happens a lot? We just sort of, okay.
It does. It really, really does, where they do settle. And that comes from, this is where the expectations become key. When you're bringing on any new person in a role, whether it's a role you had or a new role or a role you're replacing, you have very clear expectations with specific, okay, within 30 days, we expect this person to be able to do this, within 60 days, this, within 90 days, this. Because if you choose to make the decision to change it at that point, it's much easier than 2 years later, and the person is now entrenched in the company and you're trying to figure out what to do now. Because that becomes much more difficult. You need to be able to recognize whether the person is a fit and can meet the expectations quickly. And the hardest part is you have to be able to take action quickly. Because to your point, that is definitely something we see for many growing companies where they have made wrong hires. They know they made the wrong hires, but they still keep the person around far too long.
You make a really good point that I think a lot of this is on us as business leaders. It's really easy to think, oh, this person is underperforming or this isn't what we hoped for. But have you given that person the expectations? Have you told them, here's where we expect you to be in 30 days? And, here's some resources, here's some training. Have we given them everything they need to succeed? Or did we just sort of throw them in the mix and figure that they would be like us and be able to adjust quickly or they would see the same things we see, or they would have the skill sets that we have right out the gate? Do you agree that there's a responsibility that we have as leaders, whether we're hiring or managing or whatever, to...
There definitely is. There really is that responsibility to be able to communicate those expectations. But, where many companies get tripped up again is if it's in an area where they don't know or an area they don't expect, and they're hoping that this person they're bringing in will tell them some of the things that they need. And then it becomes, well, okay, did you bring in the right person who can tell you what you need for this or not? And unfortunately, that certainly becomes a lot more difficult, especially if it's an area you're not that familiar with. For instance, many business owners do not come from finance or accounting backgrounds, especially if they're not from a finance or accounting business. But many of them come from delivering a product or a service really, really well, and now they're building an entire business around it. Or their family built this from the second or third generation previously, and now they're continuing to scale and grow this. They don't know this side of the business, perhaps, and they say, okay, great, I need a controller, I need a CFO, and they hire someone who has that title in their background, not knowing what they should or shouldn't be expecting from this role. And therefore, 2 years later, when they're having these issues we're describing, they're like, well, he was a CFO, we thought he could do this. So that's where the expectations become clear, not just on just saying, okay, you need to be able to do this, but this is the impact we're looking for you to have on this company. So it goes back to just the impact of it as well. But the keeping that person 2 years, going back to where we started that conversation, that's where you get to the cost of inaction. You're paying for it by keeping this person far longer. You get what you pay for. It's not just the actual dollar amount you're laying out, but you also get what you pay for, as in you choosing to keep this person here has its own cost as well that you're choosing to pay.
How do I act with confidence if this is not an area where I feel like I know a lot? How do I hire the right CFO if this isn't an area of expertise for me beyond sort of, I don't know, checking with my network or gut checks or something? What do I do?
So first of all, call us, ProCFO Partners. That's exactly what we do. But aside from that,
absolutely a good
aside from that, yes, when I say network or things to check with, it's recognizing the experts in your network who would have good insight into this. So check with your accountant that you really know. Some bankers are really well connected to some of these kind of things. Peer networks are very, very powerful. CEO peer-to-peer advisory groups are very, very powerful in this space as well, because you're talking to other business owners who have been through similar struggles to you.
Nelson Tepfer, managing partner, co-founder at ProCFO Partners. For me, always the smartest guy in the room. Thanks for sharing some of this today. My wheels are spinning. I feel like we'll come back maybe and have a part 2 of this conversation because it's so valuable and epidemic. I mean, it's just chronic. We are constantly dealing with this, especially now as the labor market is so tight and as things are in the supply chains are so tight. We're always dealing with some aspect of this. And I feel like you really helped us touch on some practical points on this to think about. Thanks.
Thank you, Chris. Always great chatting with you.
Thanks for watching, and a special thanks to our subscribers. Consider becoming one today. Visit ProCFOPartners.com for more strategies and ideas for financial management and growth to help you put your business's financial picture in context.